So we're going to turn our attention now to a very important aspect of phenomenological writing. It's most often referred to as the phenomenological reduction, or the philosophical term is the epoche. Edmund Husserl, with his background in mathematics, called the epoche bracketing. And the word epoche comes from the Greek meaning abstention, to stay away from. So, what is it we are trying to stay away from when we're seeking to describe phenomenologically what an experience is like? Well, we're trying to reduce the experience, hence the term reduction, by setting aside anything that obscures that experience. So, in this way, in fact, when you think about it, we're not really reducing so much as we're clearing away so we can open up the experience to more possibilities. We are bracketing, we're able to put to one side those things that we usually just gloss over in our everydayness, in the experiences that slip beneath our awareness. What we take as just being common sense, taken for granted, things we assume, conventional wisdom, all these things that cloak and hide and obscure human experience. To get to the essential structure of an experience, we need to reflect on it and excavate these assumptions. Much like an archaeologist, we brush them aside, clear them away to reveal the experience underneath. So these assumptions, these things we take for granted, they may be the result of our own personal biases, our cultural prejudices, experiences, and understandings related to our gender, our orientation, our age, our ethnicity. Many would argue that it is impossible to get out from under all of these uh, impacts on our consciousness to some pure state of objectivity and object consciousness. And this is true, so much so that some researchers like Dahlberg have forsaken the term bracketing to set aside all of these assumptions that we bring with us into any experience, and they've set it aside for the term to adopt the term bridling to describe the reduction as a way to recognize that we can never eliminate what's known as our natural attitude, but we can constrain or bridle it to make room for the experience to show itself from itself. So, one way to keep the experience open and unconstrained is to name them, to name these assumptions, to describe them in a way we recognize them as possibly obscuring our attempts to come to know the experience. So let's take a minute to talk about this thing called the natural attitude, the way that we are most often in the world. And Husserl called our way of being in the world as immersed in the project of living as the natural attitude. It is that taken for grantedness of life. That's how we experience life. We most often do not think about what we're doing or reflect on what we will do next. We just do. We act. In the moment, we move, we act, we say, we do. So it's not unlike riding a bike or driving a car. After a period of practice, it becomes what we say second nature. How we relate to others, to our children, parents, those we meet on the bus, often unfolds habitually. It's a matter of routine. Phenomenology takes on the challenge of disrupting these habitual, routine, common sense ways of being, everyday ways of being, that natural attitude. We want to replace that with the phenomenological attitude. And in the phenomenological attitude, we want to set aside, as we mentioned already, bracket, bridle, as much as possible the natural attitude, the natural way of being, to see the experiences as we live them in a more original, more originary way, as we may have never seen or even thought about them before. Husserl also employed the term natural attitude to interrupt the way we most often see the world as external to us, a world out there, separate from us. One of phenomenology's primary claims is that the ego or consciousness is never severed from the world, that the sense of world is always more than a collection of empirical objects, that I am always implicated in the world and vice versa. So, from a phenomenological perspective, this naturalizing attitude conceals a profound naivete. Husserl claimed that being can never be collapsed entirely into being in the empirical world. More of a philosophical stance, he said that any instance of actual being is necessarily encountered upon a horizon that encompasses fact, but is larger than fact. There's more going on. Indeed, the very sense of facts of consciousness as such, from a phenomenological perspective, depends on a wider horizon of consciousness that usually remains unexamined. So, for example, the black cat I noticed crossing the street is both unique and, if investigated phenomenologically, reveals a common structure of or essence of cat that can apply equally well to other members of the species. I identify it. Indeed, without the structure of cat, in some sense accompanying or preceding the experience of this particular black cat, I would be unable to identify it as such. Bring that with me into that experience. There would still be an animal present to me, but even this identification is dependent upon another essence, that of animal. The point here is that seeing the individual cat presupposes a meaningful structure that is inclusive of a wider horizon of possible cats: black, spotted, green-eyed, big, small, healthy, sick, four-legged, three-legged, etc. And the empirical cat, the fact of this cat, is the foreground upon a background of possible cats, unified by my understanding of what it means, the structure, cat. So this is probably perhaps beyond what we really need to understand about the natural attitude for our purposes, but just to understand that any experience is multifaceted, that it's often sedimented under whole layers of understandings that may not be examined. And our job, our task, is to clear those away, to be able to describe the experience, to come as close to that experience as we possibly can. And so now we look at how can we clear away? How can we reveal these assumptions, these common sense attitudes, understandings that we bring to any experience? To get to the essential structure of an experience, we may need to reflect on it and excavate these assumptions. They may be the result of, we said, personal biases, our cultural biases, our gender, orientation, our ethnicity. And some would argue that it's impossible to do that at all. So bracketing, bridling, means that we constrain, we make room for the experience to show itself. We can do this by actually naming those assumptions, by revealing them, and by revealing them, we can then set them aside. So there are levels of reduction that phenomenologists use. The first one is what we talked about already, awakening a profound sense of wonder, elevating the experience, lifting it out so that we can think about it in a new way, to truly wonder, question, and be in somewhat of an amazement, turning to the experience that it is inherently a part of this mystery of a mysterious world. The second is coming to terms and laying bare our personal, subjective, private feelings, understandings that may inhibit coming to know the experience in a new way, to make contact and get as close to the experience as we can. The third, setting aside and getting behind, or again, excavating any of those previous theories, generalizations, scientific conceptualizations. Phenomenology attempts to get behind those. It's not about theorizing, it's not about conceptualizing. As a matter of fact, they are often layered on and they sediment the experience. So we need to be able to clear that away and see it in a non-abstracted way. And number four is what's called the eidetic reduction, from the term eidos, or essence. It's the phenomenologist's attempt to move beyond the lived concreteness of the experience and see how the experience points to what is shared or what is universal. What can we say about this experience in our description that will allow others to read that description and then find meaning in that, to recognize that in their lives, and to be able to say, yes, I see that. I understand that. That's it. That's how I feel. That's what I know. That is our ultimate goal in a phenomenological description. So the reduction allows us to get back to the things themselves. Husserl's maxim. It is a necessary practice before we can hope to describe the experience in a way that connects us to something more vital, something more enriched and insightful.